My wife cheated with my best friend and stole over $200K from our joint account, then filed for divorce claiming I was abusive. Now she's trying to take my family home worth $1. $2 in court. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get like this. I mean, I always considered myself pretty sharp, someone who paid attention to the little signs. But honestly, the shit that hit me was so unexpected. It's like my entire world got flipped upside down in one weekend. It all started when I noticed that Sarah, my wife, had been acting weird for a few months. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Work was hectic. She was busy with her new job, and I figured maybe she was just tired. But then, little things started to add up. She'd leave her phone on silent all the time, hide her texts, and suddenly she was always busy when I tried to talk about plans or money. She'd snap at me over small things like I was somehow bothering her, and her mood swings got worse. I didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, couples go through rough patches. Right, one night I decided to check our bank account just to see where we stood. I figured it was responsible, especially since we'd been talking about buying a new house. I logged in and what I saw made my stomach drop. Over $200, $0 had vanished from our joint account, completely gone. That's a huge chunk of our savings, and I knew we didn't have any big expenses coming up. I was stunned. I immediately looked for recent transactions. There were transfers I didn't recognize, large sums wired to accounts I'd never seen before. My heart started pounding. How could she do this? I started digging into the details, and that's when I found out about the affair. Sarah had been secretly texting someone, some guy named, who I later learned was her. The messages were explicit, full of flirtation, and some of them even hinted at a physical relationship. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I felt numb. How long had this been going on? How could she lie to my face for so long? I was furious, but mostly I was hurt, deeply hurt. Not just because she cheated, but because she stole from us, from our family, all that money, her lying to my face, and now she's trying to spin it like I'm the one who's messed up. I confronted her the next morning. I told her I knew everything about her affair, the missing money, the texts. Her face twisted into a bitchy smirk, and she tried to deny it at first, saying I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. She called me crazy, accused me of spying on her, and then she started to cry crocodile tears, claiming she only cheated because I was abusive, like that somehow justifies her betrayal. She said I was controlling, that I never listened, and that everything was my fault. I was so angry I could barely speak. I told her she was a liar, a thief, and a cheat. I told her I'd find out the truth, no matter what it took. The emotional hit me hard. I felt a mix of rage, betrayal, sadness, and confusion. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face, steal from our future, and then turn around and blame me for everything? I kept replaying the moments I thought were happy, the years we built together. And it all felt like a lie. I was furious at Sarah and furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I wondered if I'd been blind, if I missed the signs, or if she was just that good at hiding her true self. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed awake, trying to process what I'd just learned. I knew I couldn't stay in this situation. I had to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to fight, to get every penny back and expose her for the lying, cheating bitch she was. But another part just wanted out, to walk away from the mess and rebuild my life without her. I realized I had to be smart, because she was already trying to manipulate the situation in her favor, filing for divorce, claiming I was abusive, and now she's trying to take the house, which is worth over $1 million. I started to think about my options. I had to protect what was mine, especially the house where our kids still lived. I couldn't let her walk away with everything, especially after what she'd done. I decided I'd gather evidence, document everything, and prepare for a fight. I knew she'd lie, spin stories, and do whatever she could to win in court. I couldn't let her get away with it. I also knew I'd have to be careful. She was manipulative and I couldn't trust her anymore. So here I am now, trying to piece my life back together while dealing with the fallout of her betrayal. I'm angry, betrayed, and honestly, hurt more than I thought I could be. But I'm also determined. I won't let her destroy what I worked so hard for. I'll fight for my family, for the house, and for my dignity. It's a mess, but I've learned one thing. Never trust a woman who cheats and steals from you, no matter how charming she seems. After I gathered the initial evidence and confronted Sarah, things only got more complicated and faster. She played the victim so well, it made me question myself for a moment. She was crying, saying I was crazy for suspecting her, that I was abusive because I raised my voice once or twice when I was furious. She insisted she was the victim, that I was controlling, and that she only cheated because I was mean and abusive. It was classic gaslighting, and honestly, it almost worked. But I knew better. I'd seen her texts, seen the bank statements, and I wasn't about to let her spin her way out of this. The next day, she filed for divorce, claiming I was abusive. I couldn't believe the audacity. She was the one sneaking around, stealing our money, and lying through her teeth. The house, our family home worth over $1.2 million, was now in jeopardy. She said she wanted everything, that I was controlling and abusive, and that she deserved half. But I knew the truth. She'd been planning this for a while, probably since she started her affair with. I started to realize she wasn't just cheating on me. She was trying to take everything I had built, including the house that I'd worked my ass off for. I decided I had to act fast. I hired a lawyer, a sharp guy named Mike, who knew the ins and outs of family law. I gave him all the evidence, texts, bank statements, email exchanges. I told him I wanted to fight for the house, for my kids, and for the money she stole. I also started to dig into her finances more deeply. Turns out, the $200K she siphoned out of our account wasn't just random. She'd been funneling money to, probably to support his lifestyle or even to cover up her affair. I found emails where she was bragging about how she was getting away with everything, and how she was going to leave me with nothing. That made me even angrier. Meanwhile, Sarah was trying to spin her story. She told everyone that I was abusive, that I hit her, and that I was an unfit father. She wanted the house, the kids, everything. She claimed I was controlling and aggressive, which was a blatant lie. I've never laid a hand on her, never even raised my voice at the kids. But she was good at twisting the truth, and I knew she'd use the court system to her advantage. I had to be careful. I started documenting everything, texts, emails, even recordings of her calls, just in case. I couldn't trust her to tell the truth. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. It was like waking up from a nightmare, except this nightmare was real and I was stuck in it. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it coming, how I could have been so blind. I thought we had a good life, a stable marriage, a future. But she was planning her escape all along, and I was just too naive to see it. The worst part was knowing she was trying to take my home, our kids' home, and everything I worked for. I started to realize I couldn't do this alone. I reached out to my brother, who's been through a divorce before, and he told me to keep my eyes on the prize, my kids, my money, my house. He told me to stay calm, to not let her manipulate me, and to be ready for a fight. I was grateful for that advice. I also started to think about protecting my assets, setting up accounts, changing passwords, and even considering a temporary restraining order if she got too aggressive. I knew she'd try to push me to the edge, but I couldn't let her. In the meantime, she kept up the act of being the perfect victim. She was so stressed, so overwhelmed, and so hurt that I was abusing her. She painted me as the monster, the controlling husband who couldn't handle her independence. Meanwhile, she was out partying with, flaunting her affair, and spending money like crazy. I found out she'd bought designer clothes, gone on expensive dates, and even taken a trip to Vegas, all paid for with our stolen money. That made me sick. How could she be so shameless? As I looked ahead, I knew this was just the beginning. The court battles, the accusations, the lies, they were coming, but I was determined not to let her win. I would fight for my rights, for my kids, and for the house. I couldn't let her walk away with everything without a fight. I had to stay strong, stay focused, and keep my emotions in check. The betrayal cut deep, but I knew I had to be smarter than her. I had to outthink her every move because she was relentless. I still remember the moment I realized I'd been played. The house, our future, everything I'd built, she was trying to snatch it all away. But I wasn't going down without a fight. This was war, and I was ready to win. After I got the initial shock of her filing for divorce and claiming I was abusive, I knew I had to act quickly. The more I thought about it, the more clear it became that Sarah wasn't just after a separation. She was after everything I owned, the house, the money, the kids' future. That's when I decided to dig deeper into her finances and her plans. I needed to cover my bases because I could see she was already trying to manipulate the situation in her favor. I hired a private investigator to follow her around for a few days. I needed to know where she was spending her time, who she was talking to, and if she was making any moves I didn't know about. It was ugly, but I had to do it. Turns out she was meeting up with almost every night. I saw the texts, flirty, suggestive, and sometimes downright explicit. She'd send him pictures, talk about how she was so stressed and needed a release, all while telling him she was done with me. That was the moment I knew for sure she was planning her exit. Meanwhile, she kept spinning her story to friends and family, said I was abusive, that I hit her, that I was a terrible father. I couldn't believe the audacity. She even told her sister that I was controlling her life and that I had anger issues. That made my blood boil. The only anger I'd ever had was at her betrayal, but she was twisting everything to make me look like the bad guy. I started documenting everything she said and did, just in case I needed proof later. I also started to gather evidence of her financial misconduct. I hired a forensic accountant to look into her accounts. Turns out she transferred over $200 out of our joint account, money we'd saved for years. She'd hidden it in offshore accounts, probably to avoid detection. I couldn't believe her audacity. All that money gone, stolen by her, and it was like a punch to the gut. I felt so betrayed, so disgusted. How could she do this to me, to our family? One night I confronted her again. She was in tears, fake tears, I knew, and tried to accuse me of being crazy for suspecting her. She said I was violent and controlling, that I was the reason she cheated. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I knew everything, about the affair, the money, the lies. I told her I wasn't going to let her take my house, my kids, and everything I'd worked for. I promised I'd fight her in court with everything I had. And I meant it. The next step was to prepare for the court battle. I filed a motion to temporarily restrain her from selling or refinancing the house. I also requested a forensic audit of her accounts. I knew she'd try to manipulate the court, so I had to be ready. I also started talking to my lawyer about how to protect my rights and ensure she couldn't just walk away with everything. I wanted to be sure that if she tried to claim I was abusive or violent, I had solid proof to counter her lies. Meanwhile, Sarah kept up her act of being the innocent victim. She told everyone she was so hurt, so overwhelmed, and that I'd abused her emotionally. She even claimed I was violent to the kids, another blatant lie. I knew she was trying to turn everyone against me, but I wasn't about to let her succeed. I had kept every text, every email, every phone call. I had even recorded some of her conversations where she was openly talking about her affair and her plans to leave me. The emotional toll was enormous. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach every time I saw her or heard her lie. It was like I was living in a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I didn't see her slipping away, how I didn't realize she was planning this all along. The betrayal was so deep, I wondered if I'd ever trust anyone again. I felt so alone, so angry, and yet I knew I had to stay strong for my kids, for myself. I started to think about what I really wanted. I knew I didn't want to be married to a woman who lied, cheated, and stole from us. I wanted my house, my money, and my reputation intact. I also wanted to protect the kids from the chaos. I realized that I needed to be strategic and disciplined. I couldn't let her manipulate the court system or turn my family against me. I had to stay calm and focused. Every step I took now was about securing my future and making sure she didn't get away with this. Looking back, I see how naive I was. I always thought my marriage was solid, that we had a future. But Sarah was hiding her true self all along. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone who only cared about herself. The betrayal hit me so hard, I still wake up some nights wondering how I got here. But I also know I can't change what happened. All I can do now is fight for what's rightfully mine and try to rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. The court date was set unexpectedly quick, and I knew I had to be prepared for everything. Sarah was already spinning her lies to the judge, claiming I was a violent, controlling monster who abused her emotionally. She painted herself as the innocent victim, trying to sway the court with tears and bogus accusations. But I had my evidence: screenshots, bank statements, recorded conversations, and witness testimony from friends who saw her sneaking around with. I was determined not to let her manipulate the system. On the day of the hearing, I felt sick to my stomach. I showed up early, nervous but ready. My lawyer, Mike, laid out the strategy: present the facts, keep my emotions in check, and make sure the judge saw through her bullshit. Sarah arrived with her lawyer, looking confident, but I could see the flicker of anxiety in her eyes when she saw the evidence I had compiled. The hearing started with her lawyer trying to paint me as an abusive husband. She claimed I'd yelled at her, controlled her, and hit her once or twice. I knew the truth. I never laid a hand on her, but I had to hear her lies. I calmly presented the emails and text messages where she was openly discussing her affair, her plans to take the house, and how she'd stolen money. I showed the court the bank statements with over $200, $0 transferred out of our account, money she'd hidden offshore. I even presented the forensic accountant's report, which detailed her financial misconduct. Sarah's face turned red when faced with the evidence. She tried to deny everything, claiming she was forced to do these things because I was so abusive. Her tears were fake, I knew that now. The judge listened carefully, asking her questions about her actions, her affair, and her finances. When it was my turn, I explained how I'd been, how I'd trusted her, and how she'd betrayed that trust in the worst ways. I told the court that I was fighting to keep the house, which was our family's home, and to protect my children from her lies and manipulation. The judge was attentive, and I could tell she saw through Sarah's act. She asked for additional documentation, ordered a temporary restraining order to prevent her from selling or refinancing the house, and scheduled a full hearing to determine custody and property division. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders, knowing I'd done everything I could to protect what was mine. But I also knew this was just the beginning of a long legal battle. After the hearing, I felt exhausted but relieved. I knew Sarah would fight dirty, probably try to manipulate the court further and lie even more. But I had the truth on my side, and I had the evidence to back it up. I also realized I had to stay vigilant. She was desperate, and desperation makes people do crazy things. I started to prepare myself mentally for what was coming next. I knew she'd try to turn my family against me, use the kids as pawns, and do whatever it took to win. That night, I sat alone in the quiet of my house, reflecting on what had happened. The betrayal cut deep, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd always believed in honesty, in doing the right thing, but now I was forced to fight for it. I thought about the house, about the money she stole, and about how I'd rebuild my life from this chaos. I knew I'd need to be stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. I also started to think about what I wanted moving forward. I knew I didn't want her back, not after everything. I didn't want to share custody just out of obligation. I wanted full custody of the kids, to shield them from her manipulations. I wanted to restore my reputation, to prove that I was a good man who'd been betrayed. I realized I had to focus on healing, on making my life better, even if it meant starting over from scratch. The hardest part was accepting that I'd trusted her for so long, and she'd thrown it all away in some fleeting thrill. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far. But I also knew I couldn't change the past. What I could do was control what came next. And what came next was fighting tooth and nail to keep what was mine, to protect my kids, and to move on from the woman who betrayed everything I believed in. The days that followed the court hearing were some of the most intense in my life. I stayed up late every night, going over every piece of evidence, every possible angle she might try to spin. Sarah was already trying to rally her friends and family, claiming I was an abusive monster who was trying to keep her from her rights. She was telling anyone who would listen that I was violent, controlling, and unfit to be a father. That was a lie, but I knew how manipulative she could be. I had to stay one step ahead. Meanwhile, she started to push for full custody of the kids. I knew her game. She wanted to use their love and her victim story to sway the court. I wasn't about to let her do that. I had proof I was a good father, that I provided for the children, and that I always put their needs first. I gathered witness statements from friends, teachers, and even neighbors who knew me well. I kept visual records of my interactions with the kids, showing I was involved, caring, and responsible. She also ramped up her efforts to take the house. She hired her own legal team, which was aggressive and relentless. She claimed I was dangerous and violent, trying to get the court to order supervised visitation or even full custody. I knew her tactics. She was trying to wear me down, to make me look unstable. But I had the evidence, proof that I'd never laid a hand on her, that I'd always been a good husband and father. One day, she made a huge mistake. She sent me an angry email, full of insults and accusations, but buried in it was a confession. She accidentally revealed that she'd been planning to take out a second mortgage on the house without my knowledge. She said she wanted to cash out and run away with, leaving me with nothing. That was the smoking gun I needed. I immediately forwarded that email to my lawyer, who told me to prepare for a court motion to freeze the house and prevent her from refinancing or selling it. I also started to find out about her new plans. Turns out she'd been talking about moving to another state, buying a new place, and starting fresh. She was trying to cut me out completely, using the stolen money and her lies to get what she wanted. The thought of her just walking away with everything made me sick. I knew I had to act fast to protect what was ours. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry beyond words. Every day was a battle, whether it was fighting her in court, dealing with her lies, or just trying to keep my sanity. I had moments where I wondered if I'd ever recover from this betrayal. I kept replaying everything: the stolen money, the affair, her lies, and I wondered how I'd ever trust again. But I also knew I couldn't let her win, not without a fight. One night I sat in my living room, exhausted from the chaos, and looked at the photos of my family. The house was quiet, but inside I felt a storm brewing. I promised myself that I'd do whatever it took to protect my kids and my future. I realized I had to stay strong, stay focused, and keep fighting. This wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about my dignity, my reputation, and my ability to move on. I also started to plan my next moves carefully. I arranged for a forensic accountant to keep monitoring her accounts. I spoke to a security expert about protecting my digital life, changing passwords, installing security cameras, and making sure she couldn't tamper with my devices. I even considered getting a restraining order if she crossed any more lines. I had to be prepared for her next move because I knew she wouldn't give up easily. Deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The court battles, the lies, the manipulation, they were all part of her game, but I was determined not to be the losing side. I'd fought for my marriage, but when I saw her true colors, I realized that some betrayals are too deep to mend. I was ready to fight for my rights, for my kids, and for my future. I just hoped I'd come out of this stronger, even if that meant losing everything else along the way. The final stretch of this nightmare has been the hardest part yet. After months of fighting, court battles, and endless lies, I finally had to face the reality that Sarah was not going to stop trying to take everything from me. She had managed to turn some people against me, paint herself as the victim, and use the system to her advantage. But I also knew I had done everything I could, proof after proof, document after document. I stayed calm, focused, and refused to let her drag me into her chaos. One day I sat in the courtroom waiting for the judge's decision. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sarah sat across from me, her face smug, thinking she'd won. But I knew better. I'd seen through her lies, her manipulations, her desperation. I had fought tooth and nail to keep my house, to protect my kids, and to clear my name. And I was ready to accept whatever was coming, knowing I had done everything possible. When the judge finally spoke, Her voice was steady and firm. She awarded me full custody of the kids, granted me ownership of the house, and ordered Sarah to pay back every penny she stole. She dismissed her claims of abuse as baseless, calling her manipulative tactics a desperate attempt to shift blame. The court also issued a protective order, forbidding Sarah from contacting me or the children directly. It was a hard-won victory, but it felt like a huge relief. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and liberation. I knew I'd been betrayed on every level, by someone I'd loved and trusted for years. But I also knew I was stronger than I had ever thought. I had fought for my family, my reputation, and my future, and I had come out on top, even if it was a hard-earned victory. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved into a new place, started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and poured myself into my work and my kids. The house, once a symbol of my dreams, was now a reminder of betrayal, but I was determined to turn it into a new beginning. I kept the evidence I had gathered, just in case, because I knew she might try again, or worse, come back with more lies. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this ordeal. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. But I also learned that you can survive the worst kind of heartbreak if you stay true to yourself and fight for what's right. I wish I could say I'm completely healed, but the scars will always be there. Still, I'm moving forward, more cautious, more aware, and more determined than ever to protect what matters most, my kids and my sanity. This experience has changed me forever. It's shown me that some people are willing to destroy everything for their own selfish needs. But it's also shown me that strength comes from within, and that even in the darkest moments, there's a way out. I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar understands you're not alone. Stand firm, gather your evidence, stay calm, and fight for your life. Because in the end, justice might be slow, but it's worth fighting for.